I remember it like it was yesterday. I was 26, full of life and not a care in the world, hanging out with a couple of friends at a local bar. That's when Alex walked in. He was a friend of a friend, someone I'd never met before. The moment our eyes met, something clicked. It wasn't love at first sight or anything cheesy like that, but there was a definite spark. "Hey, you must be the famous Alex I've heard so much about," I said, extending my hand with a playful grin. "Famous, huh? Can't say the same about you, but I'm sure I'll remember you after tonight," he shot back, shaking my hand with a firm grip. His smirk was cocky, but there was a twinkle in his eye that made me laugh. We spent the rest of the night talking, joking around, and getting to know each other. It wasn't just the booze talking, we genuinely clicked. Our friends noticed too, nudging each other and giving us knowing looks. "So, what do you do, Erica?" Alex asked, sipping his beer. "I'm stuck in an office job for now. Dreaming of bigger things, though. What about you?" I replied, rolling my eyes at my own situation. "I work in sales. It's alright, pays the bills. But like you, I've got bigger plans," he said with a shrug, as if it wasn't a big deal. The night flew by, and before I knew it, it was time to head home. Alex offered to walk me to my car, a gentlemanly gesture that surprised me given his earlier cockiness. "Hey, I had a really good time tonight. Can I see you again?" he asked, almost hesitantly, as we reached my car. I smiled, feeling the butterflies in my stomach. "I'd like that. But only if you promise to tone down the cockiness a bit." He laughed, the sound warm and genuine. "Deal. But you've got to promise to keep up with my witty banter." "Deal," I said, shaking his hand again. This time, it felt like an agreement on more than just another meetup. It felt like the beginning of something special. We exchanged numbers, and I drove home with a silly grin plastered on my face. I couldn't stop thinking about him. There was something about Alex that felt right, like a puzzle piece I didn't know was missing. Over the next few days, we texted nonstop. Our conversations were filled with jokes, teasing, and getting to know each other on a deeper level. It was refreshing to meet someone who could match my sass and not get offended. A week later, we went on our first official date. It was nothing fancy, just dinner at a local diner, but it was perfect. We talked about everything and nothing, from our dreams and ambitions to our favorite TV shows. "You know, I never thought I'd meet someone like you in a place like this," Alex said, his tone serious for once. "Yeah? What's that supposed to mean?" I teased, raising an eyebrow. "It means, I'm glad I came to that bar that night. I'm glad I met you," he said, reaching across the table to take my hand. I felt a warmth spread through me. "Me too, Alex. Me too." That night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't help but feel like my life was about to change. Little did I know just how much it would. Meeting Alex was the start of a journey, one that would bring laughter, tears, and challenges. But at that moment, all I knew was that I had met someone special, someone who could potentially be my partner in crime, my confidant, my friend. And maybe, just maybe, something more. The days that followed were a whirlwind of emotions and excitement. Every text, every call, every date felt like a step closer to something undefined but undoubtedly special. Alex was different from anyone I'd ever met. He was real, raw, and refreshingly honest. He didn't put up a front or try to impress me with grand gestures. He was just himself, and that was more than enough. Our banter was endless, and it was during these moments of playful disagreement that I found myself falling for him. It wasn't just about the laughter and the jokes, it was the comfort and ease I felt around him. I could be my true self, and he not only accepted that, he embraced it. As the weeks turned into months, our connection deepened. We shared our dreams, our pasts, and our hopes for the future. Alex became not just a significant part of my life, but a part of me. I couldn't imagine my days without him, without our talks, without his presence. And so, a year after that fateful meeting at the bar, We made a decision that would forever change our lives. We decided to get married. It wasn't a decision we took lightly, but one that felt natural, like the next step in our journey together. Life took a turn when Emma was born. I stepped into the role of a stay-at-home mom with open arms, a decision Alex and I agreed upon. But as the days turned into months, and months into years, I noticed a shift in Alex. The man I fell in love with, who used to make me laugh until my sides hurt, was fading away, replaced by someone I hardly recognized. "Another day, another mess, Erica," Alex muttered, stepping over toys scattered across the living room floor after a long day at work. His tone, once filled with warmth, now dripped with disdain. I looked up from where I was sitting, trying to sort through bills and manage our household finances, a task that had become increasingly challenging. "Emma's just being a kid, Alex. I'll clean it up in a bit," I said, attempting to keep the peace. "Maybe if you did more around here, I wouldn't come back to a pigsty every evening," he snapped, his frustration evident. His words stung. I spent my days chasing after our energetic 5-year-old, trying to keep our home in order, and yet, it was never enough. "I'm doing the best I can," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper, the fight draining out of me. "Your best? That's a laugh. Look at you, what do you even do all day?" Alex scoffed, his gaze scanning over me in a way that made me shrink back. I bit my lip, fighting back tears. This wasn't the Alex I knew. "I take care of our daughter, our home." "I'm trying, Alex." He shook his head, disappointment etched across his face. "Trying? You call this trying? You've let yourself go, and this place, it's a mess. I work all day, and I come back to this." I wanted to scream, to argue, to defend myself, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I turned my attention back to the bills, a lump in my throat. Silence filled the room, the tension thick. The next morning, I tried to shake off the hurt from our conversation. Emma needed me, and I refused to let Alex's harsh words dampen my spirits in front of her. We were in the kitchen, her laughter filling the space as I made pancakes, a temporary reprieve from the tension. "You're the best, Mommy," Emma said, her smile bright and genuine. I ruffled her hair, grateful for her innocent joy. "Thanks, sweetie. You make everything better." But the brief moment of happiness was shattered when Alex walked in, his expression sour. "Pancakes on a weekday? What are you trying to do, spoil her? And make us all late?" I sighed, bracing myself for another argument. "It's just pancakes, Alex. It won't hurt." He grabbed a coffee, his eyes rolling. "Whatever. Just make sure she's ready on time. I don't need to be late because of your little cooking show." As he left the room, Emma's smile faded, replaced by confusion. "Daddy's mad again?" I forced a smile, not wanting her to worry. "Daddy's just tired, honey. Eat your pancakes, okay?" The day Alex announced his business trip felt like a reprieve, a chance to breathe without walking on eggshells. But even that was marred by his parting words. "Keep the house clean while I'm gone. And try not to waste all my money," he said, suitcase in hand, not even bothering to look at me. "I'll manage," I replied, my voice steady, despite the turmoil inside. "We'll be fine." He shrugged, indifferent. "Yeah, well, we'll see about that." Watching him leave, I felt a mix of relief and sadness. This wasn't the life I envisioned when we said "I do." The love, the partnership, it all seemed like a distant memory, overshadowed by resentment and misunderstandings. In a house filled with tension and cold silences, I found my old brushes and paints one day, buried under years of neglected dreams. It felt like a lifetime ago since I last held them in my hands, back when I was a bright-eyed girl at the art studio, with my teacher telling me I had a future in painting. But life, as it often does, took me down a different path. I studied economics, a practical choice, and my canvases gathered dust. Painting again felt like a breath of fresh air, a momentary escape from the endless cycle of chores and Alex's growing indifference. Each stroke on the canvas was a whisper of the person I used to be, someone who had dreams and aspirations beyond these four walls. Really, Erica? Painting? What are you, 12? Alex's voice cut through my moment of peace one evening as he caught me setting up my easel in the living room. His parents were visiting, and they all stood there, staring at my setup like it was a joke. I bit my lip, feeling the familiar sting of embarrassment. I used to love painting, I managed to say, trying to defend my old passion. His mother snorted, looking over my shoulder at the half-finished canvas. Looks like a child's work. Wouldn't it be better if you did something useful instead? Alex joined in with a cruel laugh. Yeah, like maybe getting a job instead of wasting money on this nonsense. I felt my face flush with shame, the joy of painting souring in my mouth. I thought it might be nice to have something of my own. I whispered, more to myself than to them. Of your own? With what money? You're spending my hard-earned cash on this garbage? Alex's tone was sharp, his words like daggers. I use my savings, I replied quietly, my defense weak against his growing anger. Savings? What savings? From before we married? That's cute. Listen, because of your little hobby, I'm going to have to cut the budget around here. Can't have you blowing through my salary on your art, he said, the last word dripping with disdain. His parents nodded in agreement, their looks of disapproval etching deeper into my heart. I wanted to scream, to argue that it was my money too, that I had every right to find some joy in my life. But the words died in my throat, the fight drained out of me by years of being belittled and dismissed. From that day on, I kept my painting to myself, a secret refuge from the storms outside. I bought my supplies with what little money I could squirrel away, each canvas and tube of paint a tiny rebellion against the life I felt trapped in. Painting became my silent protest, my way of holding on to the parts of me that still dreamed of something more. The tension in the house could cut through steel when Alex's parents showed up. They never missed a chance to point out everything they thought I was doing wrong. Can't you even make a decent cup of coffee? His dad grumbled as I handed him a mug. I forced a smile, trying not to let the comment get to me. His mom wasn't any kinder. This breakfast, you call this special? Back in my day, we knew how to treat guests. Her nose turned up at the eggs and bacon I'd spent the last hour preparing. I bit my tongue, keeping the retort that was dancing on its tip at bay. I'm sorry you feel that way. I'll try to do better, I mumbled, feeling anything but sorry. As if on cue, Alex called. I excused myself, hoping for a brief escape from the criticism. But the call wasn't the respite I hoped for. Listen, I need you to get something for my boss's wife. Her birthday is coming up. Alex's voice was brisk, all business. I blinked, taken aback. Alex, I don't really have the budget for. I don't want to hear it. Figure it out. It's important. He cut me off, his tone final. And with that, he hung up. I stared at the phone, stunned. Solve it myself? With what? Magic? Frustration bubbled up, but it was quickly overshadowed by worry. I couldn't mess this up. Not for Alex. In desperation, I turned to the internet, scrolling through the boss's wife's social media for any hint of a suitable gift. That's when I stumbled upon her interest in painting and support for aspiring artists. It was a lightbulb moment. I couldn't afford a fancy gift, but maybe, just maybe, I could create something personal. Something meaningful. I decided right then, I'd paint her something. It felt like a solid plan, but I kept it to myself. Alex was already on edge, and I didn't need his scoffing or doubts. No, this would be my secret project. A chance to prove, if only to myself, that I could contribute something valuable. That I was more than the freeloader his parents saw or the inadequate wife Alex seemed to think I was. During that week, my apartment turned into a mini art studio. I was focused on creating something beautiful, something that would stand out. Beside me, I set up a tiny easel for Emma, my daughter, who was thrilled to join in. She decided to draw a portrait of me, her concentration face on, tongue poking out slightly as she worked. It was a mess of colors, but to me, it was perfect. Alex was away, wrapped up in his work, clueless about the plan brewing back home. When he finally called, it was just to confirm that we'd meet at his boss's wife's birthday bash. "Make sure you dress nicely," he added, as if I needed reminding. "Yeah, got it," I replied, my mind already racing through my wardrobe for the right outfit. It wasn't just about looking good, it was about feeling confident, something I hadn't felt in a while. The day of the party arrived quickly. I stood in front of the mirror, slipping into a dress that made me feel like myself again. It had been so long since I dressed up for anything. Emma watched, her eyes wide. "Mommy, you look like a princess," she exclaimed. I laughed, bending down to give her a hug. "Thank you, sweetie. Mommy has to go now, but I'll be back soon, okay?" Emma nodded, clutching the portrait she made of me. "Good luck, Mommy. Give your painting to the lady." With a deep breath, I grabbed my painting, now beautifully wrapped, and headed out. The drive to the mansion was a blur of nerves and anticipation. As I parked and stepped out, the enormity of the house hit me. It was more like a palace, with lights illuminating the grand architecture. I paused at the entrance, taking a moment to gather my courage. Inside, the sounds of laughter and music floated out, a world so different from my own. It wasn't just about giving a gift anymore, it was about proving to myself that I could stand tall in this crowd, that I was more than just Alex's wife or a stay-at-home mom. With a final deep breath, I stepped inside, my head held high, ready to face whatever came my way. This was it, the moment of truth. I was ready to join this society, to show them and myself what I was capable of. Stepping into the grandiose hall of the boss's mansion, the chandeliers overhead and the murmur of high society filled the air. I hadn't taken 2 steps before Alex found me, his eyes scanning me up and down with a frown. "What are you wearing, Erica? Look around you, do you see anyone else dressed like that? You stick out like a sore thumb," he hissed, not even bothering to hide his disappointment. I glanced around, noticing the elegant dresses and perfectly coiffed hair of the other women. I felt out of place, my confidence wavering under his critical gaze. "I thought I looked okay," I muttered, feeling small. Before I could defend myself further, he noticed the wrapped canvas under my arm. "Don't tell me that's what I think it is. You didn't." I nodded, clutching the painting a bit tighter. "It's a gift for your boss's wife. I thought she'd like it." Alex's face turned red, his anger palpable. "You thought? Are you a fool? This is a disaster. You're going to embarrass me in front of everyone with your amateur art." His words stung, but before I could respond, his loud complaints caught the attention of the very people we were talking about. The boss and his wife approached, curiosity and concern mixing on their faces. "What's all this about, Alex?" his boss asked, eyebrows raised. Alex, trying to regain composure, forced a laugh. "Oh, nothing much. My wife here thought it'd be a good idea to gift your wife one of her paintings. I tried to tell her it's not appropriate, but you know how it is." The guests around us snickered, their eyes on me, waiting to see my next move. The boss's wife, however, seemed intrigued. "I'd love to see it. I appreciate all forms of art," she said, her voice kind and encouraging. With trembling hands, I unwrapped the painting, revealing my work. The room fell silent as everyone waited for her reaction. The boss's wife studied the painting, her eyes moving over every detail. Then, her face broke into a genuine smile. "This is wonderful. Truly, you have a gift. How thoughtful of you to create something so personal." Alex's mouth hung open, his earlier bravado gone. The guests, too, were taken aback, their laughter dying down as they realized their mistake. I'm glad you like it," I stammered, a mix of relief and pride washing over me. The boss clapped Alex on the back, a knowing look in his eyes. "Looks like your wife knows how to make an impression, Alex. Well done." As the crowd dispersed, some throwing me impressed looks, Alex stood there, his earlier criticisms unspoken now. The boss's wife, intrigued by my unexpected gift, led me away from the bustling party to a quieter part of the mansion. The walls of this secluded room were adorned with an impressive array of paintings, each telling its own story. As we moved from one piece to the next, our conversation flowed effortlessly, delving into techniques, styles, and the stories behind the canvases. "I'm quite surprised," she admitted, her eyes reflecting genuine interest. "You understand art deeply, Erica. Ever thought of organizing your own exhibition?" Her question caught me off guard, sending waves of embarrassment and excitement through me. "Me? An exhibition? I wouldn't even know where to start," I stammered, the idea seeming as distant as the stars. It was then Alex found us, his timing as impeccable as ever. Overhearing the tail end of our conversation, he laughed, the sound harsh and unwelcome. "An exhibition? For what? Her kitty scribbles? Come on, let's go home. This party's over for us." The boss's wife's expression shifted from warm to cold in an instant, clearly not pleased with Alex's interruption or his demeaning words. I felt a rush of embarrassment, but also a spark of defiance. For once, I wasn't going to let his words dictate how I felt about myself or my art. "No, Alex," I said, my voice steady, stronger than I felt. "I'm not going home. Not yet. I want to explore this idea, my own exhibition." His face turned a shade of red I hadn't seen before, his eyes wide in disbelief. Without another word, he stormed off, leaving a trail of awkward silence behind him. The drive home later that night was a battle between elation and dread. I had stood up for myself, but at what cost? As soon as I stepped through the door, Alex was there, his anger boiling over. "You've embarrassed me. In front of my boss, my colleagues. What were you thinking?" he yelled, pacing back and forth. I took a deep breath, my decision made in the clarity of his tirade. "I was thinking about my future, Alex. A future where I'm more than just your wife, more than a housekeeper. If that embarrasses you, then maybe we shouldn't be together." His ranting stopped, his face a mix of confusion and shock. "What are you saying? You want a divorce? Over some stupid paintings?" "Yes, Alex. A divorce," I said, the words feeling surreal even as they left my mouth. "I can't live like this anymore. Being belittled, feeling trapped. I want more from life, and if that means without you, then so be it." The silence that followed was deafening. Alex stood there, staring at me as if seeing me for the first time. The man who had left in a huff at the party was now the one in shock, unsure of what to do next. After deciding to divorce Alex, I braced myself for a storm, but nothing could have prepared me for the hurricane that ensued. The divorce was messy, to say the least. Alex turned it into a battlefield, contesting every single detail. He didn't want to part with a penny, especially when it came to alimony for Emma, our daughter. He even tried to keep most of our shared assets, leaving me to fight tooth and nail for what was rightfully half mine. The whole debacle wasn't just confined to family and close friends, it spilled over into Alex's professional life. His colleagues and even his boss caught wind of his less-than-stellar behavior during our divorce. The man who prided himself on his impeccable reputation at work saw it tarnished. Before long, whispers of his pettiness and vindictiveness led to his demotion. It was a steep fall from grace for someone who had always put his career above everything else. In the midst of this turmoil, an unexpected ally emerged, Alex's boss's wife. She fulfilled her promise and organized my first personal exhibition. It was an opportunity one never dreamed of, a silver lining in the dark cloud that had loomed over my life. With her guidance and support, my paintings found an audience. People were drawn to my work, seeing stories and emotions in my brushstrokes. I held several solo exhibitions, each more successful than the last. My paintings began to sell, not just to friends and acquaintances, but to strangers who felt a connection to my art. The money I earned from my paintings allowed Emma and me to move into a nice apartment, a place we could call our own. It was a fresh start, a chance to rebuild our lives on our terms. Looking back, I never imagined my life taking such a turn. The pain of the divorce and the ugliness that came with it seemed insurmountable at the time. But through it all, I discovered my strength, my passion, and my ability to stand on my own. As I sit in our new living room, surrounded by canvases and paint, I can't help but feel optimistic about the future. For the first time in a long time, I'm excited about what lies ahead. Emma, now thriving in a happier, healthier environment, is my constant reminder that we made it through the storm.
The morning started like any other. I rolled out of bed, the familiar sounds of my husband Jordan's gentle snoring filling the room. Padding across the cool hardwood floors, I made my way to the bathroom and splashed some water on my face, trying to shake off the lingering grogginess. As I glanced in the mirror, I noticed something that made my heart skip a beat. A faint spotting, barely noticeable, but enough to set off alarm bells in my mind. I tried to push the worries aside, telling myself it was probably nothing, but deep down, I knew better. Jordan and I had been trying for a baby for over a year now, and the constant disappointment had started to take its toll. Every month, the same cycle of hope followed by crushing despair. I tried to stay positive, focusing on my job as an elementary school teacher, but the longing for a child of our own was becoming harder and harder to ignore. Over breakfast, I debated whether or not to bring up my concerns to Jordan. He was always so supportive, but I could see the frustration in his eyes whenever the topic of children came up. It was as if he was starting to doubt whether it would ever happen for us. "Everything okay, babe?" Jordan asked, picking up on my distant gaze. I forced a smile. "Yeah, just lost in thought." He reached across the table and gave my hand a gentle squeeze. "Don't worry, it'll happen for us. We just have to be patient." His words were reassuring, but I couldn't help but feel a twinge of doubt. What if something was wrong with me? What if I could never give Jordan the family he so desperately wanted? The day passed in a blur, my mind constantly drifting back to the spotting and the nagging fear that something wasn't right. By the time I got home from work, I had made up my mind. I needed to see a doctor, if only for peace of mind. Jordan was supportive, as always, but I could see the concern etched across his face. We sat in the doctor's office, holding hands tightly, bracing ourselves for whatever news was to come. "Mrs. West," the doctor said, her voice somber, "the tests indicate that you're experiencing early ovarian aging. It's a condition that can make it difficult, if not impossible, to conceive naturally." The words hit me like a ton of bricks. Impossible to conceive. My world came crashing down around me as I struggled to process the news. Jordan pulled me close, whispering reassurances in my ear, but I could sense a shift in his demeanor. A flicker of doubt, of disappointment that he quickly tried to mask. As we drove home in silence, I couldn't help but wonder if this was the beginning of the end for us. Could our love survive this devastating blow, or would the strain of infertility be too much for us to bear? Over the next few months, Jordan and I tried to remain positive, exploring every possible treatment option. He was supportive at first, holding my hand through the grueling rounds of fertility drugs and the invasive procedures that left me emotionally and physically drained. "We'll get through this together," he would say, pulling me close after another disappointing negative test result. But as time went on, I could sense a subtle shift in his demeanor. The reassuring smiles became more forced, the comforting words rang a little hollower. It was as if the constant disappointment was starting to wear him down too. One night, after another failed attempt at conceiving, Jordan let his guard down. "I just don't understand why this is so difficult," he muttered, his voice laced with frustration. "My parents had 4 kids without even trying." The words stung, reminding me of my own perceived inadequacy. I tried to brush it off, but the comment lingered in the back of my mind, planting seeds of doubt that would only continue to grow. As the weeks turned into months, the distance between us seemed to widen. Jordan began to bury himself in his work, coming home late and retreating to his home office for hours on end. I tried to be understanding, knowing that he was dealing with his own disappointment in his own way, but the loneliness was becoming unbearable. One night, as I was cleaning up after dinner, I noticed Jordan's phone lighting up with a text notification. Normally, I wouldn't have thought twice about it, but something made me pause. A nagging feeling, a voice in the back of my mind telling me to take a closer look. I shouldn't have done it. I knew it was a violation of his privacy, but the temptation was too strong. I picked up his phone and felt my heart sink as I read the message. "Can't wait to see you tonight, babe. I'll bring the wine." The words seemed to jump off the screen, taunting me with their implications. My hands trembled as I scrolled through the rest of the conversation, each message more damning than the last. Jordan came home a few hours later, his eyes glazed over and his movements unsteady. The smell of perfume lingered on his clothes, a scent that wasn't mine. "Where have you been?" I demanded, my voice shaking with a mixture of anger and heartbreak. He looked at me, his expression a mixture of guilt and defiance. "Out with some colleagues from work, we had a few drinks to celebrate a project launch." The lie was so blatant, so transparent, that it only added insult to injury. I wanted to scream, to rage against the betrayal, but the words caught in my throat. "I know about the texts, Jordan," I finally managed to choke out. "I know you're seeing someone else." For a moment he looked stunned, like a deer caught in the headlights. Then his expression hardened, and he let out a bitter laugh. "Is that what you think?" he sneered. "Maybe if you could give me a child, I wouldn't have to look elsewhere for satisfaction." The cruelty of his words cut me to the core. In that moment, I saw the true depths of his selfishness, his willingness to place all the blame on me for our struggles. As he stormed off to the bedroom, slamming the door behind him, I sank to the floor, tears streaming down my face. The man I thought I knew was gone, replaced by someone cold and callous, someone capable of the ultimate betrayal. But even in my grief, a spark of determination began to flicker within me. Jordan may have thought he had the upper hand, but he had no idea what I was capable of. The game was just beginning, and I intended to play to win. The revelation of Jordan's infidelity hit me like a ton of bricks, but I refused to let it break me. As the days turned into weeks, I found myself retreating into a shell, isolating myself from friends and family as I grappled with the pain and betrayal. Jordan, for his part, seemed wholly unrepentant. He would come and go as he pleased, spending more and more time away from home, no doubt in the company of his mistress. The few times we did cross paths, the air was thick with tension and unspoken accusations. "Why are you doing this to us?" I finally worked up the courage to ask one evening as he was heading out the door. He paused, his hand on the doorknob, and turned to face me with a cold, emotionless stare. "Maybe if you could give me what I really want, I wouldn't have to look elsewhere." The words cut deep, but I refused to let him see how much they hurt me. Instead, I met his gaze with a steely determination, silently vowing that he would pay for his cruelty. As the weeks dragged on, Jordan became increasingly brazen in his deception. He would come home late, reeking of cheap perfume and alcohol, and stumble off to bed without so much as a word. It was as if he had completely given up on even trying to hide his indiscretions. One night, as I sat alone in our living room, staring blankly at the flickering TV screen, I heard a faint, buzzing noise. It took me a moment to realize it was coming from Jordan's jacket pocket, which he had carelessly tossed over the back of the couch. Part of me knew I shouldn't look, that I was only setting myself up for more heartache. But another, more primal part of me couldn't resist the temptation. With trembling hands, I reached into the pocket and pulled out his phone. The screen was lit up with a string of text messages, each one more damning than the last, explicit photos, suggestive comments, and promises of secret rendezvous that made my stomach churn. As I scrolled through the messages, a sense of rage began to build within me. How dare he? How dare he betray me in such a callous, brazen way? The man I had once loved, the man I had vowed to stand by through thick and thin, was nothing more than a snake in the grass, a selfish, deceitful coward. That's when I made a decision. I wasn't going to sit idly by and let Jordan continue to humiliate and disrespect me. No, it was time to take matters into my own hands. If he wanted to play games, then I would play too, and I would make sure I came out on top. From that moment on, I became a woman possessed. I started keeping a meticulous log of Jordan's comings and goings, documenting his every lie and indiscretion. I gathered evidence, screenshots of the damning text messages, receipts for expensive gifts and hotel rooms that he had no doubt charged to our joint account. And all the while, I played the part of the oblivious, dutiful wife, lulling Jordan into a false sense of security. He had no idea that the ground was shifting beneath his feet, that his carefully constructed web of lies was about to come crashing down around him. It was a dangerous game I was playing, but I was fueled by a burning desire for justice, for revenge. Jordan had made a grave mistake in underestimating me, and he was about to learn that lesson the hard way. Little did he know, the true storm was only just beginning to brew. As the weeks passed, I found myself becoming consumed by my quest for revenge, meticulously gathering evidence of Jordan's misdeeds. But even as I built my case against him, a part of me still clung to the hope that it was all some terrible misunderstanding. That hope was shattered one night at a neighborhood party. Jordan and I had agreed to make an appearance, putting on a united front for the sake of appearances. As we mingled with our friends and neighbors, making small talk and sipping lukewarm beer, I couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. And then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw her. A petite blonde woman, no older than 25, sauntering across the room with a confidence that bordered on arrogance. Our eyes met briefly, and she flashed me a sickly sweet smile that sent a chill down my spine. "Who's that?" I asked Jordan, trying to keep my voice casual. He followed my gaze, and I saw his expression shift ever so slightly. "Oh, that's Kaylee. She's new to the neighborhood." The way he said her name, the slight catch in his breath, told me everything I needed to know. This was the woman he had been seeing, the one he had been sneaking around with behind my back. As the party wore on, I found myself unable to take my eyes off of Kaylee. She moved through the crowd with ease, flirting shamelessly with any man who crossed her path, including Jordan. At one point, I caught them engaged in what appeared to be a heated conversation, their faces inches apart as they whispered back and forth. Kaylee's hand lingered a little too long on Jordan's arm, and I felt a surge of jealousy and anger coursing through my veins. When Jordan finally broke away and made his way back to me, I couldn't hold my tongue any longer. "So, who is she really?" I asked, my voice low and laced with accusation. Jordan's eyes widened, and he quickly tried to compose himself. "She's just a neighbor, babe. I was welcoming her to the community." The lie was so blatant, so insulting, that I felt myself shaking with rage. "Don't treat me like an idiot, Jordan. I saw the way she was touching you, the way you were looking at her." For a moment, he seemed caught off guard, like a deer in the headlights. Then his expression hardened, and he let out a bitter laugh. "You want to know the truth?" he spat. "She's the woman who's going to give me what you can't. A family." The words hit me like a physical blow, knocking the wind out of me. I stumbled back, my vision blurring with tears as the weight of his betrayal crashed down upon me. Jordan must have seen the pain in my eyes, because his expression softened ever so slightly. "Look, Lila, I'm sorry, but this isn't working. We both know it. Maybe it's time we face the fact that we want different things." I wanted to scream, to lash out at him for his callousness, his complete disregard for my feelings. But somehow, I found the strength to hold my tongue. "You're right, Jordan," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "It is time we faced the facts." And with that, I turned on my heel and walked away, leaving him standing there, stunned and alone. As I made my way through the crowd, my mind was racing. Jordan had shown his true colors, and there was no going back. The gloves were off, and I was prepared to fight dirty if that's what it took to bring him down. Little did he know, I had been preparing for this moment all along. And when the time came, I would be ready to deliver the ultimate revenge. After the devastating confrontation at the neighborhood party, I knew I had to take action. Jordan had made it crystal clear that he was done with our marriage, that he was ready to move on and start a new life with his young mistress. But I wasn't about to let him off that easily. Not after everything he had put me through. For days, I seethed in silence, biding my time and waiting for the perfect opportunity to strike. Jordan, emboldened by his admission, became even more brazen in his infidelity, spending nights away from home and making little effort to hide his liaisons with Kaylee. It was during one of these extended absences that I finally made my move. Using the wealth of evidence I had gathered over the past weeks, the incriminating text messages, the hotel receipts, even grainy photographs of Jordan and Kaylee in compromising positions, I began to piece together a damning case against him. I knew that if I wanted to truly hit him where it hurt, I needed to expose his betrayal in a way that would humiliate him, strip him of his false sense of superiority, and bring him crashing back down to earth. And so I hatched a plan. Late one night, after Jordan had once again failed to come home, I slipped out of the house and made my way to his office. I knew the security codes, the hidden spare key, all the little tricks he thought he had kept so carefully guarded. With trembling hands, I accessed his computer, rifling through files and folders until I found what I was looking for: his personal email and social media accounts, the digital lifeblood that he so carelessly left unprotected. One by one, I began forwarding the incriminating evidence to his closest friends and colleagues, his family members, even his boss. Explicit photos, damning text conversations, receipts for extravagant gifts and hotel stays, nothing was left out. And then, just for good measure, I took to his social media accounts, broadcasting his infidelity for the whole world to see. To my so-called husband Jordan West, I wrote, my fingers flying across the keyboard with a newfound sense of empowerment. This is the truth you've been so desperate to hide. I hit send, and just like that, the floodgates were open. Jordan's carefully curated facade came crumbling down, his sordid secrets laid bare for all to witness. As I made my way back home, a strange sense of calm washed over me. I knew that the fallout would be nuclear, that Jordan's world was about to implode in spectacular fashion. But for the first time in months, I felt like I was finally in control of my own destiny. Jordan came stumbling in just before dawn, his shirt rumpled and his hair disheveled. He reeked of alcohol and cheap perfume, the telltale signs of another night spent in Kaylee's arms. He didn't even look at me as he staggered towards the bedroom, lost in his own drunken haze. It wasn't until later that morning, when his phone began to buzz incessantly with a barrage of calls and text messages, that the reality of what I had done began to sink in. "What the hell is going on?" he demanded, his voice thick with panic as he scrolled through the damning evidence that I had so carefully curated. I simply shrugged, a small, satisfied smile playing across my lips. "I believe the truth is finally out, Jordan." His eyes widened in horror as the full weight of my actions hit him. In that moment, I could see the arrogance, the smug sense of superiority draining from his face. "You're going to pay for this," he hissed, his hands balling into fists at his sides. But I wasn't afraid. Not anymore. "No, Jordan," I said, my voice calm and steady. "It's you who's going to pay." And with that, I turned and walked away, leaving him to face the consequences of his own actions. The battle had been won, but the war was far from over. In the aftermath of my public exposure of Jordan's infidelity, the fallout was swift and brutal. His once thriving career lay in tatters, his reputation irreparably damaged by the sordid details I had so meticulously laid bare. Friends and family members who had once rallied around him now turned their backs, disgusted by his betrayal. Even his own parents, once so proud and doting, could barely bring themselves to look him in the eye. As for me, I found myself riding a wave of vindication, basking in the knowledge that I had finally taken back control of my life, my dignity. Jordan had thought he could discard me like yesterday's trash, but I had proven him wrong in spectacular fashion. Still, there was one final piece of the puzzle that needed to be put into place. A few weeks after the explosive revelation, Jordan and I found ourselves seated in the familiar waiting room of our fertility doctor's office. The air between us was thick with tension, a palpable sense of animosity that had only grown more pronounced in the wake of my retaliation. "Mrs. West, the doctor will see you now," the receptionist called out, her voice laced with a hint of pity that made my skin crawl. Jordan rose to his feet, shooting me a venomous glare as he brushed past me and made his way towards the examination room. I followed closely behind, steeling myself for what was to come. Well, what a pleasure to see you both again," the doctor said, her tone dripping with sarcasm as we took our seats. "I must say, your personal lives have certainly been eventful as of late." Jordan shifted uncomfortably in his chair, his jaw clenched tightly. "Can we just cut to the chase, Doc? I'm sure you didn't call us here to gossip." The doctor arched an eyebrow, clearly unimpressed by his bravado. "Very well, then. Mr. West, after reviewing your latest test results, I'm afraid I have some rather unfortunate news. She paused, letting the words hang in the air for a moment before delivering the final blow. It appears that you are suffering from a severe case of male factor infertility. Your sperm count and motility levels are well below the normal range, making it highly unlikely that you would be able to conceive a child naturally. The room seemed to spin around me as the doctor's words sank in. Jordan, the man who had so callously blamed me for our inability to have children, the man who had sought solace in the arms of another woman in pursuit of his dream family. He was the one with the fertility issue all along. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. Then Jordan let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head in disbelief. "You've got to be kidding me," he spat. "After everything, after all the hell you've put me through, you're trying to pull this stunt?" The doctor's expression hardened. "I assure you, Mr. West, this is no stunt. The test results are conclusive and they speak for themselves." Jordan opened his mouth to protest, but I cut him off, unable to contain the fury that was bubbling up inside me. "You know, Jordan, I almost feel sorry for you," I said, my voice dripping with contempt. "All this time you've been pointing the finger at me, accusing me of being the reason we couldn't have children. You let your own selfishness and insecurity drive you into the arms of another woman, all because you were too blind to see the truth." His eyes widened as the realization began to sink in, the weight of his own lies and betrayal crashing down upon him. You knew," he stammered, his face pale. "This whole time, you knew." I couldn't help but let out a bitter laugh. "Of course I knew. Did you really think I was going to let you get away with what you did to me, to us?" The doctor cleared her throat, clearly uncomfortable with the unfolding confrontation. "Perhaps we should continue this discussion another time, when emotions have had a chance to settle." But I wasn't done yet, not by a long shot. "No, doctor, I think it's time Jordan heard the full truth," I said, turning to face him head on. "You see, while you were off gallivanting with that little tramp, I was busy collecting evidence. Every sordid detail, every dirty little secret. I have it all." Jordan's face drained of color as the weight of my words sank in. In that moment, he knew he had been beaten at his own game, outmaneuvered and outsmarted by the very woman he had so callously discarded. "And now, thanks to your own carelessness, the whole world knows exactly what kind of man you really are." I continued, relishing in the look of abject horror on his face. A liar, a cheat, a coward who was too weak to face his own shortcomings. Silence hung heavy in the air, punctuated only by the sound of Jordan's ragged breathing. For once in his life he was utterly speechless, stripped of his bravado and left to confront the harsh reality of his own actions. As we left the doctor's office, Jordan trailing behind me like a wounded animal, I couldn't help but feel a sense of triumph. The battle had been long and hard fought, but in the end justice had prevailed, and for the first time in a long time, I felt truly free. In the days following the devastating revelation of Jordan's infertility, I found myself riding a wave of vindication and triumph. After months of being gaslit and betrayed, the tables had finally turned, and Jordan was the one left reeling in the aftermath of his own lies and deceit. But my quest for justice was far from over. As word of Jordan's indiscretions spread like wildfire through our small community, I knew I had to strike while the iron was hot. I had already exposed him to our closest friends and colleagues, but there were still those who remained blissfully unaware of the true depths of his betrayal. And so, I hatched a plan, one that would ensure Jordan's humiliation was complete and inescapable. It was a warm summer evening when I invited both of our families over for a casual get-together. Jordan, still reeling from the bombshell I had dropped at the doctor's office, was in no position to protest. One by one, our loved ones trickled in, exchanging pleasantries and sipping on cool drinks as the golden sun dipped below the horizon. Jordan plastered on a forced smile, doing his best to maintain the illusion of normalcy despite the palpable tension in the air. Little did they know, I had already set the stage for the ultimate reveal. As the night wore on and the conversations began to flow more freely, I seized my opportunity. Clearing my throat, I clinked my glass with a fork, commanding the attention of the room. "Friends, family, thank you all for being here tonight," I began, my voice steady and confident. I know these past few months have been trying for all of us, but I think it's time we address the elephant in the room. Jordan's eyes went wide, his knuckles whitening as he gripped the arms of his chair. He knew what was coming, but he was powerless to stop it. You see, for a long time, I believed that our struggles to conceive were my fault, I continued, my gaze sweeping across the rapt faces of our guests. Jordan led me to believe that I was the one with the fertility issues, that my body was letting us down. A collective gasp rippled through the room, and I could see the looks of pity and concern etched on their faces. They had no idea what was about to hit them. But the truth is, Jordan was the one who was unable to give me the child I so desperately wanted, I said, my voice growing stronger with each word. He was the one who was shooting blanks, so to speak. Jordan let out a strangled sound, his face flushing a deep crimson as the gravity of my words sank in. But I wasn't done yet, not by a long shot. And instead of being honest with me, instead of facing the truth like a man, he chose to betray me in the worst possible way. I paused for effect, letting the weight of my next words linger in the air. He cheated on me, with a woman half his age, no less. The room erupted in a cacophony of gasps and murmurs, eyes darting between Jordan and me in disbelief. "That's a lie!" Jordan shouted, shooting to his feet in a rage. "She's twisting the truth, manipulating all of you." But it was too late. With a few deft taps on my phone, I had already set my plan in motion. Suddenly, the room was filled with the unmistakable sounds of Jordan's voice, captured in a damning audio recording I had made during one of our many heated arguments. "You're never going to be able to give me what I really want." His voice crackled through the speakers, laced with venom. "A real family, with kids of my own. Maybe it's time we face the facts. This marriage is over." A deafening silence fell over the room as the recording faded out, punctuated only by the sound of Jordan's ragged breathing. "You see, Jordan thought he could have it all," I said, my voice ringing out in the stillness. "He thought he could discard me like yesterday's trash, all in pursuit of his twisted dream of starting a new family with his mistress." I let the words hang in the air, letting them sink in for all to hear. But what he didn't count on was me fighting back. He never expected me to uncover the truth about his own infertility, his own lies and deceptions. Jordan opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. He was utterly defeated, laid bare before the very people he had once tried so hard to impress. As our loved ones filed out one by one, casting disgusted glances in Jordan's direction, I couldn't help but feel a sense of triumph. The battle had been hard fought, but in the end, justice had prevailed. And as I watched Jordan slink away, his head hung in shame, I knew that my quest for revenge was finally complete. In the aftermath of my explosive revelation, Jordan's world came crashing down around him. His once promising career was left in tatters, his reputation irreparably tarnished by the sordid details of his infidelity and deception. It didn't take long for the fallout to reach Kaylee, the young mistress who had so brazenly inserted herself into our marriage. As the truth of Jordan's lies and my vengeance came to light, she was quickly cast aside, reduced to a mere footnote in the twisted saga of our unraveling. I'll never forget the look on her face when she realized the depths of Jordan's betrayal, not just towards me, but towards her as well. The tears streamed down her cheeks as she confronted him, demanding answers that he simply couldn't provide. "You told me you were going to leave her," she had sobbed, her voice thick with anger and heartbreak. "You said we were going to have a family together." Jordan for once was rendered speechless. The mask of arrogance and bravado he had worn for so long had finally slipped away, leaving him exposed and vulnerable. "Kaylee, he stammered, his eyes darting around the room in desperation. "It's not what you think." But she wasn't having any of it. With a strength I didn't know she possessed, she gathered her things and stormed out, leaving Jordan to wallow in the wreckage of his own making. As for me, I found myself, slowly but surely, picking up the pieces of my shattered life. The road to healing was a long and arduous one, but with each passing day I could feel the weight of Jordan's betrayal lifting from my shoulders. I threw myself into my work, pouring my heart and soul into teaching and connecting with my students in a way I never had before. Their smiling faces, their boundless energy and enthusiasm became a balm for my wounded spirit. and slowly but surely, I began to rebuild my social circles, surrounding myself with people who truly cared for me, friends and family members who had stood by me through the darkest of times. It wasn't easy, and there were moments when the pain and anger threatened to consume me once again. But I was determined to emerge from this experience stronger, more resilient, and more grateful for the people and things that truly mattered. As for Jordan, his fall from grace was as spectacular as it was well-deserved. Without the support of his family and friends, and with his professional reputation in tatters, he found himself adrift, grasping at straws in a desperate attempt to salvage what was left of his life. The last time I saw him was at the courthouse, where we had gathered to finalize the terms of our divorce. He looked like a shell of his former self, his once confident demeanor replaced by a haunted, hollow gaze. "Lila," he said, his voice barely above a whisper as he approached me in the hallway. I don't know what to say." I regarded him coolly, my heart hardened by the months of pain and betrayal he had put me through. "Then don't say anything," I replied, my voice firm and unwavering. "You've said more than enough already." He opened his mouth as if to protest, but the words seemed to die on his lips. Instead, he simply nodded, a flicker of resignation passing across his face, and with that, he turned and walked away, disappearing from my life for good. In the months and years that followed, I found myself gradually letting go of the anger and bitterness that had once consumed me. Jordan's transgressions, while painful, no longer held the same power over me. I had emerged from the ashes of our failed marriage like a phoenix, reborn and reinvigorated, ready to embrace the next chapter of my life with open arms. And as I looked towards the future, one thing was certain. I would never again allow myself to be defined by the actions of others, nor would I ever let someone like Jordan take away my sense of self-worth and dignity. I was my own woman, strong and resilient, and nothing, not even the cruelest of betrayals, could ever change that.